I am Amina Abiola, wife, mother, woman who kept a house of light. Our life looks seamless. Laughter from a 5-year-old, a husband's practiced tenderness, the city's gloss outside our windows. But small things tell the truth. A mislabeled bottle in a cabinet, a fingerprint, not mine. I hold my daughter's laughter like a secret. It will steer every plan toward mercy and toward justice.
Stay with me to hear the shocking story, and make sure you click that subscribe button right now so you don't miss other stories like this. Sit back to know how it all started.
The city slides by in a ribbon of glass. He kisses her hand. His phone buzzes a secret. I watch that flicker like a cartographer maps a hidden stream. I do not confront, not yet. I catalog. Zuri is home with the nanny, the monitor light steady. I measure my distance so I can move without endangering the child. Every small signal from Tunde becomes a map toward the truth.
A simple ritual becomes accusation. The pill's color, the sticker of a different pharmacy, a faint scent on plastic. I place the wrong bottle in my palm like a stone, heavy with intention. I will not be the first to shout. For my daughter's sake, I will be patient and precise. I tuck the proof away and let observation do the slow work. A husband who thinks he can tip a scale will learn instead what balance costs.
Beneath ordinary papers, I find a lit map, names, dates, hotel codes, small betrayals arranged like chess pieces. I take photographs with the steady hand of someone protecting a child's future. I write to the first woman, not with fury, but with a proposal. Do you want him, or do you want to stop him? Zuri sleeps. Her breath measures my oath. I will not build my answers where our daughter can be harmed.
I bring my daughter along because truth must meet its witnesses with tenderness. Zuri colors and offers crayons without knowing the consequence of the pages she brightens. I show Ife the messages and speak of bedtime songs and the world a child imagines. The woman's defenses shift when she respects the child's trust. She sees not a rival, but a future at stake. She agrees, not to destroy lightly, but to protect fiercely. I tell Salma about a tiny hand that expects 2 steady returns at dusk, about a song Zuri hums that names both parents with equal love. A ping arrives, a question from my nanny. Will Daddy come? The smallness of that question begins to unmake excuses. Salma, who once justified a lie for comfort, sees the cost in a child's heartbeat. She joins us not for spite, but to rebuild what a child should be allowed to keep.
I leave only when the nursery light steadies and Zuri's breath is even. On the rooftop, I whisper the prayer she falls asleep to, and the words land like a plea and a directive. Chioma's walls fall as she understands that what is at stake is not a rivalry, but a child's right to unbroken love. She consents to bind her life to ours in this, to stop a man who would trade tenderness for convenience.
We sign a pact in hush. Zuri's drawing becomes our treaty. Each of us carries keys, small privileges, confidences, entrances into rooms he thinks private. We will not brand him before our child, but we will unmake him in the places that mattered to him, in his pride, in his choices, in the people who fed his vanity. Our measures are precise, maternal, and merciless where a child's peace is threatened. We begin to weave our net quietly, each woman a precise thread with access he never suspects. Salma moves through dinners and client corridors, noting a recurring name linked to weekend receipts. Ife pretends a coincidental hotel booking to observe room numbers and staff. Chioma times his exits, studies drivers' faces and cleaners' rotations. I remain the steady center, watching the nursery monitor and catching Zuri's laugh over the line, because every action must leave her untouched, while he is boxed by invisible walls.
On a Saturday, the house becomes our stage for subtle theater. I fold my acting into tenderness, a slight tremor, a practiced stumble, a hand that needs support, just enough to needle his instincts. The women signal from safe distances with coded texts, a reflection in a cafe window, a soft ringtone that means move or wait. The nanny pings updates. Zuri builds a tower beside me, humming a song about two hands. Her presence forces precision. Our tactic is surgical, sparing spectacle that could scar her childhood.
A misstep reveals another seam. Chioma's tail spots an extra car at a valet lane. A nervous man steps from an unmarked sedan and slips a thick envelope into a courier's bag before melting into traffic. Ife captures the exchange from a cafe window with a pen that masks a recorder. Salma photographs plates using a spoon's reflection at brunch. I stitch these shards into my ledger while humming Zuri's bedtime prayer into the nursery monitor, evidence gathered like pearls for a careful, private reckoning.
We craft emotional snares, intimate and precise. I call Tundone late, voice small and weary, and let him cradle my vulnerability. He relaxes and begins to narrate nights, investments, and names he thinks buried. His sentences become currency, maps of desire and shame that I collect. In private rooms, we place small detonations. A mistress leaves an apologetic note that hints at a room and a date. A valet forgets a folded receipt in a jacket. And I, listening to Zuri breathe on the monitor, watch his composure fray. He believes himself the steady axis of our life, until the axis begins to wobble. In the sanctum of his study, he paces like a man counting steps in a dream. Receipts and notes appear like breadcrumbs of a life he thought opaque. We do not shout. We allow silence to become his interrogator. A misplaced keycard, an unremembered voicemail, a name whispered in his memory. Each small thing is angled to pry open doors of guilt. From my study, I listen to his falter, cradling the nursery monitor and the sound of Zuri's even breathing, because every unravel must end with a woman who keeps her child safe. We gift our daughter light and cake and a small, perfect afternoon, because revenge carried in a child's ear would be a crime against the very thing we protect. He leans in to kiss Zuri, and his smile sells normalcy. Later, when he excuses himself to finish paperwork, the house rearranges itself into a private theater for truth. A scarf, forgotten, arrives with proof tucked in its fold. A courier misplaces an envelope with dates. A colleague murmurs in passing what he had only whispered in bed. Each tender domestic moment becomes the setting in which he is made to confess what he wanted hidden. Away from the birthday candles, away from our child's light.
I bring the night close,
and the study closer still, and I tell him I am afraid. He responds with the candor of a man who confuses mercy for weakness. He explains the small economies of his betrayals, how pills could be swapped, how a silence could be bought, how a life weighed less than a ledger entry. He speaks his contempt and his calculations with careless clarity. While he believes his confession is private, our women collect every syllable, recordings, a dash cam, a voicemail, so that his truth will sit heavy and undeniable in places he cannot scrub or pretend away.
We condense months into a single wooden box. Evidence that smells faintly of hotel rooms and late-night colognes. A mislabeled bottle, a ledger of receipts, voicemails playing his own casual cruelties. I open it for him alone, and the room becomes a slow witness. He cycles through disbelief, rage, pleading. I offer him two things: a private exit that allows Zuri to keep both parents' love within safe bounds, or a slow, intimate disassembly, accomplished not by headlines, but by the people who once fed his vanity. Friends, colleagues, lovers, each withdrawn in polite, private refusal. It is a choice shaped around our daughter's future. It is merciless where necessary, and merciful on our terms.
There is a blade that cuts deeper when wielded by someone you once trusted. Ife was not a stranger. She was the girl who caught Amina's braids in childhood rain, the friend who shared secrets across exam halls. That history makes her betrayal a slow, hot wound. When the tablet slides across the parlor table, Ife's face folds into something like confession, and then steel. We decide his punishment must pierce what he prized most: private comforts and hidden accounts. So we orchestrate a private squeeze. Bankers who were friends politely freeze transfers. A favored car is quietly repossessed by a mechanic who once owed him favors. All moves are intimate and silent. Each cut reduces his world without spectacle. While Zuri sleeps, the nursery monitors green steady in the other room. We administer consequence the way surgeons remove a tumor, precise, private, and with hands that have once comforted. Salma calls an old banker who owes a favor, transfers tied to shadow accounts, slow to a legal crawl. Chioma leans on a mechanic who once took cash in hand and now produces a lien that quietly removes a prized car. Ife meets him in a dim lobby and performs the old friend, soft, wounded, then blunt with the ultimatum. He is not publicly shamed. His oxygen is throttled by the private removal of conveniences he mistook for permanence. Always, before any act, I check the nursery's green light. Zuri naps untouched, the child's routine, the morality by which we measure each cut.
He wakes to the small death of convenience. Cards declined, drivers absent, doors that once opened now politely closed. The world he moved through like water feels viscous and strange. He calls old numbers, his voice frays into pleading. Ife meets him again, this time without the illicit softness of a mistress. She returns as the friend who remembers childhood vows and now reads a ledger of conditions. Limited contact, restitution into a sealed escrow that remains unreachable until he shows measurable change. I watch Zuri stack blocks and hum. Her small laws, nap, song, story, are the boundary we will not cross. His reduction is private and relentless, and it is measured against a single rule: protect the child's memory at all cost.
We do not seek spectacle. We demand accountability where it once slept. In a private room, we lay out the cost of indulgence to those who once smoothed his path, and ask for simple things: distance offered politely, favors withheld until he proves change, a network that will not coddle relapse. Some leave with regret, others offer conditional support, therapist names, agreed check-ins, an escrow that holds until restitution. No banners are raised. There is only the sober removal of enabling hands. Zuri's laughter plays like a metronome down the hall. Our work finishes in civility. The man is smaller now, his comforts pared away, and life for the child keeps its small, luminous edges.
We ask for proof, not to punish for sport, but to make repair legible. Salma calls a friend, an accountant who hates spectacle but loves numbers, and we turn our folders into a private audit. Each receipt, each recorded phrase becomes currency. We translate nights into sums and calculate restitution that can be held in escrow until measurable change appears. The point is precise. Remove the advantage he bought with lies and convert it into a resource for those he harmed. A child's future becomes the accounting measure, no public fury, only a ledger that forces repayment or maintains quiet consequence. I keep glancing at the nursery monitor. The green light is the law we bow to first.
We present him terms he cannot laugh off because they operate in the medium he valued most: money and access. Restitution will be calculated and placed into a sealed escrow. Shell accounts must be closed. Regular financial statements will be submitted to an appointed trustee. These are not legal theatrics, but practical levers that convert deceit into repair or sustained sanction. Ife sits across from him, her voice quiet, the old friendship making her refusal sharper than any stranger's scorn. He signs or he faces private, escalating restriction. The child's play clicks on like a small, stern metronome down the hall. Mercy, we decide, follows accountability.
Comfort had been his currency. Drivers, keys, rooms held on his name. We convert that currency into leverage. A driver reassigned for health reasons. A hotel account quietly deactivated. A club membership recategorized to private review. Each removal is courteous in form and decisive in effect. Friends explain logistical inconveniences rather than moral condemnation, and the man feels not an accusation so much as a thinning of oxygen. The point is not humiliation, but consequence, precise enough to be inescapable. At home, I tuck Zuri into pajamas and read the same story I always do. Her world remains stitched and small, while his larger world cools in polite, private decrees.
Old stories return, like a scent. Rain on tin roofs, braided hair,
a promise whispered between girls. Ife speaks of nights when survival felt like barter, and how a long loneliness made certain compromises seem small. Amina listens, face calm, voice folded into a compassion so tight it becomes steel, and then names what cannot be undone, a friendship stretched into betrayal, a choice that harmed an innocent. Their history makes the act of resistance twice as sharp. Ife will not ease the pressure, because easing would mean re-entering complicity. The private squeeze must continue. Mercy is measured and conditional, and the cost of familiarity is carried in both women's throats as they look down at a sleeping child and vow that nothing will break her small world.
Numbers speak where words felt too messy. The audit translates a string of knights and favors into a restitution figure that stings with accuracy. Hotel receipts, altered invoices, transfers traced into shadow accounts, each item folded into a sum large enough to matter. We draft a contract not for court, but for conscience. The money sits in sealed escrow, released only if verified steps toward repair are recorded. Therapy milestones, reconciliatory payments to those harmed, public admissions where appropriate, and demonstrable behavioral change. It is not vengeance, it is conversion. Turn what was taken into a resource for repair. Ife signs with hands that once braided Amina's hair. Her signature is heavier than any stranger's. Always, before pens touch paper, I look at the nursery monitor's green eye. Zuri's sleep is the moral lock that governs every clause. Our instrument is private, juridical in its own small way, and structured so he cannot buy his way out of accountability without becoming someone the child can safely know.
He had lived inconveniences he never learned to steward. We remove them like a surgeon removes a prosthetic no longer needed. The driver who once opened his car is reassigned with a note about family emergency. A chef who prepared private dinners now accepts a longer contract elsewhere. A hotel account is gated by security review. These are gentle amputations, courteous, plausible, and devastating in accumulation. The man learns to queue, to wait, to call and be placed on hold, small humiliations that do not scream but corrode. We verify each move against the one true law in the house, Zuri's routine. Only when the nursery monitor shows the green nap light do we act. The child's sleep is the metronome by which every harm is measured. The aim is to make his day porous and uncertain until habit yields to accountability.
Ife meets him where light refracts, an atrium glittering with other lives. She speaks in a voice that remembers shared lunches and adolescent vows, and that memory makes every accusation sting sharper. She recounts with quiet accuracy, nights logged against a ledger, a pill bottle swapped like a dirty joke, a calendar of favors he treated as inventory. There is no melodrama, just a friend who has seen the arithmetic of his choices and now refuses to be part of the sum. Her ultimatum is private. Sign to the restitution, close the shadow accounts, enter sustained therapy, and accept supervised contact, or watch as the small civil world withdraws itself in polite increments until even the habit of impunity is gone. The fact that the voice is hers, someone who once braided his hair, turns consequence into confession and makes his options painfully narrow.
Consequence is a slow fever, not a single flame. Over a week, the private squeeze completes a cycle. An account frozen at a banker's quiet request, a corporate ally politely declining assistance, a friend rerouting favors to other channels. These losses are domestic, no tabloids, no spectacle, but they hollowed the architecture he used to stand on. We log every withdrawal in our ledger because restitution must be provable, and the escrow must be untouchable until the conditions are met. Back home, I pack a picnic and borrow a bright kite, so Zuri will have a weekend that looks, from her vantage, like any other. Cheese sandwiches, a story about two hands, a kite flying under a sun. We keep evidence and joy in separate hands. One secures accountability, the other secures childhood. That is the measure we chosen. Private, exacting justice designed only to remake a life to be safe for a child.
We turn human nights into a ledger, and the ledger becomes a map of responsibility. Receipts folded into sleeves, voicemails transcribed, photographed key tags matched to hotel lists. Every ordinary object becomes testimony when placed in order. We do not publish, we account. The women sit around a lamplit table and decide who must be repaid, who deserves a private apology, and which harms must be converted into restitution paid from a sealed escrow. Ife lays down a note with her own name on it, a confession about times she failed a friend for small comforts. The admission tastes like salt in the room. I place Zuri's newest crayon drawing on the top of the folder. 3 smiling figures beneath a sun, the picture functioning as our treaty. Protect this child at all costs. We proceed by green light. A glance to the nursery monitor before each move, so that every punitive measure is timed around a sleeping child's safety. Our ledger is not vengeance on paper. It is a juridical map aimed at repair, and it hums with the moral math of what must be returned before mercy is permitted.
We spend money to make right in private, because repair requires tenderness as much as ledger figures. A clinic bill is paid without formality, a rent notice is erased, and a small business owner gets a discreet check to cover a lost contract. These are not grand gestures. They are precisely the things that tether a person back to daily dignity. We visit doorways and repair stations, hands empty of cameras and full of apology and restitution. Amina kneels before a woman whose wages were eroded by quiet, cruel actions and speaks the only language that can matter, a clear apology and a check that says, "We see what happened." Ife watches with a public confession folded into each gesture. Her history with Amina makes every act heavier and truer. Back home, Zuri builds a block tower while the nanny hums. The child's ordinary joy is the measure against which we spend our funds, and the discretion of our acts keeps the healing human rather than theatrical.
We call people who once smoothed his path and ask them to choose between old comfort and a child's right to safety. The conversation is private, direct, and framed in moral terms. will you continue to lend dignity to a man who traded his wife's safety for convenience, or will you insist on restitution and transparency before offering help? These calls are not dramatic. They are the hard, polite questions that alter networks. Some allies withdraw politely and are recorded as soft refusals. Others agreed to refer him to true counselors and to hold their support conditional on documented change. Every answer is entered into our ledger because promises must be verifiable. Zuri sleeps upstairs. The nursery monitors green light, a quiet law. Our tactic is communal. Rebuild a child's world by remaking the social scaffolding around truth and accountability.
Over 7 days, the net tightens in ways that the tabloids will never see, but that alter the practical life he led. A bank's compliance officer, nudged by a private referral, places extended holds on suspicious transfers. A boutique hotel flags his profile and revokes loyalty privileges silently. A corporate partner freezes an intermediary conduit that once smoothed dark movements. These are not spectacles of ruin. They are calibrated amputations of the conveniences that underwrote his arrogance. Each institutional action is verified, time-stamped, and entered into our ledger so the escrow remains airtight. We act only under the nursery monitor's green light. Zori's nap times are sacrosanct and govern the tempo of our moves. When the day ends, I sit with my daughter, finger-painting a sun and a bird, and the two worlds balance, one hand on crayons, the other on evidence. Our justice is private, meticulous, and aimed to remake a man into a father who must earn presence rather than assume it.
Children make questions like lanterns, small, bright, and impossible to ignore. Zori points to a paused video where Daddy's face looks pale and asks why his voice sounds like it hurts. I bend down until my face matches hers and give an answer that is true but not wounding. Daddy is having a hard time, honey. He's learning to be better. The truth is partial, a bridge we can stand on without exposing her to the ledger's teeth. But questions are contagious. Zuri's worry seeps through the house like light under a door, and the women who engineered his private fall feel the edges of what we are doing in the tremor of a child's worry. We rescan our plans through the child's gaze and fold in extra pauses, more supervised calls, kinder tones, immediate small comforts, so punishment does not turn into a new harm for the little heart that loves them both. A child's worry redraws the map. In the study, we take Zuri's question as a hard mandate. Punishments must not translate into a child's sorrow. We write a new rule on paper and seal it into our folders. If a move causes visible distress in Zuri, we pause and heal immediately. We plan small, restorative gestures, an unannounced illustrated postcard, an extra bedtime tale, a picnic hat tucked into a pocket so the nanny can produce a sudden delight. We also rework supervised contact scripts so that calls are brighter and briefer, and any adult tone of disappointment is softened by coached warmth. Ife confesses how years of loneliness warped her judgment. The admission makes our work holier and grimmer. Each of us signs the new rule not ceremonially, but as a promise. Accountability for him, sanctuary for her. The ledger keeps its edge, but mercy now carries a Rubicon. Never, ever a child's sorrow.
The man we softened into private collapse reveals something human: pain. In a supervised room with a therapist seated between them, Tunde attempts a silly rhyme, and the sound breaks, an honesty that is both penitent and destabilizing. Zuri watches him, small brow furrowing, asking aloud if Daddy is sad. The therapist coaches the adults. Name the feeling, reassure the child, let affection be real but bounded. It is a delicate choreography. Teach Zuri about human feeling without making her the map upon which an adult's repair is drawn. Ife looks away. The past between her and Amina pulls tight in her chest as she sees the man who once mattered reduced to trembling remorse. We log the session in the ledger as both evidence and witness. His tears do not erase the harms, but they complicate our calculus. We must protect the child's ease even when the father's pain might tempt us to either harden or soften the hand of consequence.
Repair wears a timetable. The therapist prescribes small, repeatable acts, a practiced picture book read twice a week with a supervised coach present, short calls that begin and end with a joke, formal apologies to victims, recorded and filed for the escrow's release conditions. We coordinate these moves like a careful project, confirming the nursery monitor's green light before each to ensure Zuri's experience remains gentle. Over several days, she begins to fold this new reality into her map. Daddy can be tired and still read a story that makes her laugh. She receives extra comforts, a hand-painted postcard slipped under her pillow, a surprise pastry at breakfast. So her worry reduces into a cautious curiosity instead of a constant ache. We log every session and every restitution transfer as proof that change is happening on paper and in practice. The ledger grows not just with harms, but with measured attempts to repair. Our morality asks for visible evidence of transformation before mercy widens into trust.
We learn that maintenance is where mercy and rigor meet, and that the two are not enemies but parts of a single architecture. On a Saturday morning, we choreograph small recoveries. He reads a practiced picture book. He folds a napkin the way Zuri demonstrates. He helps with a tiny coached chore. The therapist sits near and names feelings aloud when the child asks why her father's voice breaks. A lesson on sadness and trying becomes a gentle bridge for 5-year-old understanding. After the visit, we file notes and timestamps into the ledger, therapist observations, the father's short scripted apologies, the child's smile when a joke lands. Each recorded kindness loosens our grip a degree. Each tremor of relapse tightens it back. We are curators of a child's memory now, crafting ordinary days that will outlast the ledger, and choosing mercy only where evidence shows the man is truly learning to hold himself differently.
A child's question can rearrange strategy. When Zuri asks if Daddy will always be sad, the answer is honest and small. He is trying, love. But the question rings through our plans like a bell. We close the nursery door and convene in the study to rescan the ledger with a child's ears in mind. Session notes, escrow conditions, timestamps of restitution. The rule sharpens. If our pressure is visible to the child, we must immediately follow with a restorative action that reasserts safety. A sudden favorite snack, an extra story, a silly postcard under a pillow. Ife sits with her confession fresh and says that seeing his pain is its own echo, an inadvertent salvo against a child's ease. We accept the complication. Accountability need not be cruel to be effective. We refile plans, add mandatory comfort gestures, and move forward with the nervous tenderness of women who protect a life that cannot be collateral.
We ask for gestures that are visible enough to matter, but private enough to avoid spectacle. He records an apology into a voice file, names read carefully, words measured, and the audio is lodged in the escrow as proof of acknowledgement. Then, in a quiet room, he hands over a restitution envelope to a person harmed. The exchange is photographed, time-stamped, and entered into our ledger. These acts are tests as much as gifts. Does his voice carry remorse or performance? Does his hand tremble with shame or rehearsed control? Meanwhile, Zuri attends a small music class where she claps for a tiny recital and seems to breathe easier. Later, she sees her father walk to a secure box under supervision and drop a sealed envelope. She watches briefly and then returns to play. We file each artifact, audio, image, stamped receipt, because mercy here is conditional and documented. The ledger becomes a record of a man's slow attempt to earn presence rather than take it.
We close in a sunlit field where a small voice carries over grass and picnic blankets. Zuri's song about two hands, about holding and being held. He is there in the distance, allowed, limited, tethered by agreements that keep his presence safe for a child who deserves lightness. The ledger is not burned. It sits in a sealed box as both promise and protection, a place to which we can always return if the bargains falter. The women do not celebrate ruin. We inventory consequence and watch for repair. We teach our child that some doors stay open only if someone has learned to walk through them differently. The day ends with ordinary things: sandwiches, crayons, a kite that refuses to fall. In the quiet, we accept that vigilance is our final, ongoing mercy, a promise to guard a small life so that her sun keeps rising.
If you enjoyed our story, subscribe for more twists like this. Like and share our video to warn someone who shouldn't trust just a smile.